Springleaf Residences is the first mega development in the Upper Thomson area. I myself do have some concerns, which is why in this video, we are going to answer 3 of my main concerns, which I believe will be your concerns as well. First is definitely the pros and cons of this untested location, because honestly, this place has no schools, not really a place where there is a lot of amenities as well. If you are one of Guaco Land or Hong Leong's buyers or any ex-owners, actually you do have priority before the public booking to choose your units. And when I look at past projects, there is scenarios whereby priority buyers, they tend to not choose the right units, which resulted in them overpaying. And finally, we'll also look at what kind of units to look out for in order to exit easier next time, because this is actually a very, very big development, close to 1,000 units. You need to be extremely intentional and strategic about what units you will be picking. If this content is going to benefit you, do remember to join me on my Telegram channel, because this is where I will actually voice out my opinions over the latest property news. Sometimes I also share with you what are the possible dropout units that will be upcoming. Likewise, if you have not seen Springleaf Residence show flat and you require professional advice on how to select units, then do reach me at my contact here. So now let's move on to our first question. This is the location that we are located at, which is right next to Springleaf Condo. There is a lot of greens. This area is mainly landed homes. There hasn't been anything like this in the past decade. So this is actually quite an untested area for a large project like this. Being a first mover of sorts, I do understand it sometimes can get quite scary. So how do we actually determine if there is any future resale potential in this area? Actually, I always like to understand the government strategy behind selling GLS, because Singapore's land is very scarce. There is always a moving reason why they want to do so. And I just want to understand behind the government strategy, right, of them wanting to come into this area and sell a condo in heavily landed and forested area. Here's what I think is happening. If you pull out the MRT map and look at the red line, right, you'll notice something interesting. Particularly, let's focus into this area, which is from the Yio Chu Kang all the way up to Tayo area. Now, this is where we actually can notice that there's severe lack of affordable public housing supply along the Toa Payoh, the Ang Mo Kio, the Bishan stretch. The few condos that I remember offhand which are newer is Sky Habitat, Sky View, and Panorama. You'll notice that the prices are almost similar to what Lentor launches are. Plus, if anybody will want to stay here, right, and if they only prefer the newer houses, there is not much supply there because land is pretty much filled up with the older HDBs. So those younger people who wants to stay near the parents, right, actually you'll see that from here, if you drive around this area, there's very limited affordable housing options, especially when we come to private property. I think the Thomson East Coast Line is really to solve this problem. From the most far end, Woodlands is actually the furthest end, right? This is where the most affordable housings in the entire Singapore is. And then you look through this whole stretch all the way linking down to the Stevens and Napier area. So right down here is really towards the core central, the Orchard area. Between Orchard and Woodlands, there is really not much private housing here, except for those very, very big landed area lah. And this is where you can see that there is this huge affordability gap in between. So if there's people that wants to stay along the Thomson East Coast Line, they don't want to stay in Woodlands, nor can they afford anything nearer to Orchard. This area is actually where they can look at, which is between Springleaf all the way up to Bright Hill. And this area, if we zoom into the supply, right, there's actually not much choices, which is why I think there is always a reason why the government wants to build this. I don't think the government actually spend billions on the Thomson East Coast Line just to leave this gap unfilled, right? So from how I see it is they actually built the MRT up first. Now they are also systematically developing these areas along the Thomson East Coast Line to create this missing middle income housing, which we are looking at lah. And I feel that there is proof, right, that it has done well and it is actually filling up this gap nicely, because take a look at Lentor's performance. When it was launched, people were afraid of oversupply, right? But fast forward today, almost all the units are sold out. And the market has actually validated this. Now, we are looking at Springleaf right over here. This is definitely next in line. And we see that the indicative pricing follows the same successful lentor, and based on the starting price is quite affordable. And of course, my priority in this video is to help you snag the best deals. This is the starting price. It is something that belongs to the earlier stage of what lentor launches are. In fact, when I look at some of the past ECs launches, the prices that have already done and transacted, right? So now the key question is whether developers will price units based on the indicative price, increase it gradually, or have huge big jumps from this starting price. Which brings me to the next important part. If you have ever bought a development by Guaco Land and Hong Leong, or you are a current tenant in one of the developments, you are eligible to be in the priority queue. For more terms and conditions, I have added in the screenshot here for you to reference lah. But in short, if you are a priority buyer, you get to book before the public launch, which typically is 1 to 2 days earlier. This is important because if you know how to select your units correctly, right, you can generally have more savings than others. Now, to understand how this happens, I'm going to use another previous project, which is Lentor Mansion. Because it is by the same developer, they also had a priority booking whereby 16th of March was open to public, and those that were priority was able to buy on the 15th of March.
Here we actually see two different two-bedroom units where the highest floors actually was transacted at a lower price. So on March 15, we can see these two different priority purchasers, which who actually bought a unit at the highest floor but enjoyed a lower purchase price, which in comparison, on the next day, the unit is one floor lower on the same stack, which by right is typically cheaper, is sold at a higher price. So this meant that developers increased prices after priority sale.
So actually, we know that the developers increase roughly on average about 1% price when they launch to public after the priority queue. The priority queue buyer, right, he was able to buy a much higher floor, which by right should cost even more. So this actually demonstrates that the priority purchaser got more advantage.
But however, do you know that if done incorrectly, you could also be at a disadvantage as a priority buyer? So let's take a look at these units that were transacted on those 2 days between priority booking and public booking. Let's look at these 4-bedroom as an example. So there are 2 units here that we are going to see. First is stack 43 facing the pool with the opposite block quite nearby. And the next one is actually on stack 23 with more premium facing. So both are actually the same unit type and located on the same floor. Stack 43, which was sold on priority day for 2.778 million. Next day, when open to public, the more premium facing, which is facing the park, Stack 23 was actually sold for 2.787 million, which was just $9,000 more. So for just $9,000 top up, right, wouldn't you actually want the most premium stack view in this development? So stack 23, has that unblocked park view versus the full view with another block directly facing opposite view. Now the question goes back to, if you as a buyer, would you actually end up choosing these inferior units just because of that day you are more overwhelmed by the number of choices that are available? Of course, I'm not saying that this is not chose out of preference, but what very often happens when I see such transactions is, even if this isn't just priority booking, right? If you're on day 1 and you have queue number, which range from number 1 all the way up to maybe queue number 80, I think the most common problem is you have a lot of choices to choose from.
Buying early doesn't guarantee good deals unless you navigate properly. Just now in the examples, we have seen day 1 buyers securing better prices than priority buyers. Why is it so? It's because there is lack of information and buyers do not have full access of the price list. So with too many options, you tend to be overwhelmed because you are not able to properly filter the price list. Now the last thing is because during that priority day when everybody is excited, you have limited decision time. Typically during the snake queue when you are queuing up, the prices are reviewed to few people at a time. So this causes a lot of early buyers to make poor decisions. So how do we actually solve this problem is by going through this step-by-step priority queue strategy which I have prepared for you. Now, the first thing is to actually shortlist the unit types by budget. Now, let's say for example, you have a $1.2 million budget and you can choose between a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom. Or if let's say you have a $1.4 million budget, then you are definitely looking at something between 2-bed, 1-bath and 2-bed, 2-bath. If let's say your budget is a little bit more higher of about $1.7 million, then you can compare between a 3-bed compact or a 2-bed, 2-bath, which usually these two unit types fall within your budget. The first thing is to pick between these two units, which is type B2 and type C1, based on this size, because one is 646 square feet, the other is 786 square feet. Now, based on this 140 square feet, how to determine if it makes sense to top up in terms of the price? Assuming the price gap between stack 12 to stack 13 is about $200,000, so this translates to about $1,429 per square foot for an additional 140 square feet. Now, assume the price gap between stack 12 and stack 13 is $300,000, so this translates to the per square foot change to about $2,142 per square foot. Now we want to work out whether it makes sense for you to have the top up or not. So how you do it based on the formula is based on the price difference, you divide by size difference, which equates to the per square foot that you have to top up based on that additional space. So if added space cost is significantly below development's average per square foot, it is of good value. But however, if it's higher, then of course you do have to reconsider. So let's say for example, based on this average per square foot is about $2,100, the top up is about $1,400, then it actually makes sense for you to top up based on that additional 140 square feet. But let's say, for example, the average per square goes up $2,142 per square foot, then this will mean that the top up might not be worth it and you do have to re-evaluate based on your entry price. Now, the next step you want to do is to compare all units of that type, same floor. So say you chose the 786 square feet unit, there are quite a few facings, right? You have to compare the prices across stacks on the 7th floor, forest facing, and then facility facing and highway facing, which is like what I stated here, because based on this, you have to find a premium for each facing. Sometimes the best facings unit might not be much more expensive, so that's where you can get the real value lah. But of course, the exact calculation, if you're not so sure, you can reach out to me and I can actually advise you accordingly. Now, the next step is to compare between the layouts within the same unit type and compare it to similar layouts. For example, today you have the budget to compare between 2 3-bedroom units, which as seen over here, take Springleaf, which is 786 square feet versus 818 square feet. Now, you want to make sure that you check the layout's efficiency. Are there actually windows in all the rooms? And is there any wasted space? So let's say if there is, then you have to compare between the per square foot again. If the larger or more efficient layout has lower or equal per square foot, then go for it. Does it make sense for you to go for a higher floor or the lower floor? The last step is actually to request key floor prices. You have to plot prices for several units on several stories. What do I mean by that? Is you want to see which floor level actually makes more sense. So what you can do is select your preferred stack first. Let's say for example, you are going for stack 12. Then you have to ask the prices for specific units. For example, right now you are looking at level 25 on stack 12. How do you want to make sure the per floor increment makes sense? You want to ask for specific floors, which is, for example, level 1, level 6, level 11, level 16, and 21 and 25. So you can see every 4 to 5 levels ask for one price. This shows where the price jumps usually occur. If certain floors have sharp jumps, for example, $80,000 on level 10 and $50,000 on level 15, then this is where you'll know the value sweet spot based on the per floor increment. But the more complicated thing is you have to check not fewer than 15 prices, because this will give you clarity on how how the developers actually price the per floor increments. And this will help you be more confident in terms of making decision for your purchase. Although you can prioritize the early access, but please do not rush into decisions based on the 5 steps I've given you. Use formulas and data for unit selection, and do remember to eliminate options quickly using price logic and layout analysis, which I have actually shared. Most importantly, when you're buying a unit, you do want to make sure that you stay within your budget limits. And using this particular framework, I believe that you can avoid common priority buyer mistakes. And if you're still not sure on how to do it, you can reach out to me and I'll help you prepare properly before launch date. Now, the last thing is, because this project has a special characteristic, it comes with a conservation building. So let's talk about the conservation units, which is special. But usually the special units tend to be something that I want to be very, very careful about. So my biggest question when I saw the units there is, do conservation units have resale demand? So we have seen a similar case study at Avenue South, which had similar high-rise and heritage blocks. There was this 2-bedroom which was in the conserve block at 807 square feet. It had an entry price of 1.48 million, whereas the typical 2-bed, 2-bath, which is on the high-rise development, it was 732 square feet, which is in the taller tower. It had an entry price of 1.332 million. Now, both were sold at around the same per square foot, but the conserve costs $150,000 more simply because it has a bigger size. Even though a conserve building feels more spacious, but in usually the case, right, you end up paying more for space that may not add real value. Now, same story for the 3-bedders. Although the profits are actually pretty similar, but you can see that a conserve unit bought at 1,754 per square foot, sold at 2,100 per square foot, whereas the high-rise building 3-bedder actually bought at about 2,000 per square foot and sold at 2,400 per square foot. Despite buying cheaper, the tower unit saw a higher profit due to better price performance. And usually high-rise developments tend to be more sought after. So when there's more demand in high-rise, it helps to beef up the prices more. So like what I mentioned, right, when we buy property, we try to avoid very special character units. But if let's say you want to still consider Springleaf, my advice is to only consider the conservation units if developers price them very competitively against high-rise units. So if they charge a premium for the heritage character, I think it usually will not make so much sense. So I do advise you to avoid it completely, because you are dealing with a much higher price that you need to sell, and at the same time you're also dealing with a very niche buyer market. So with most important concerns already done, let's dive into the project overview. For Springleaf residents, there's actually 941 units across 5 blocks, which includes conservation building with 32 units. The TOP is roughly about 2029. In terms of the basement car parks, is pretty generous, about 750 parking lots. It is also 5 minutes walk to MRT. In terms of unit mix, it ranges from 1 bedroom in the conservation all the way up to 5 bedrooms in high-rise buildings. The largest segments are mainly focusing on 39% 3-bedroom, and then the 2 bedrooms at 35%. I think this unit mix is quite healthy. The developers is very own stay focused, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important driving factor to ensure that you have healthy profits in the resale market. We are going to run through the layout analysis. The first one to look at is actually the 1 bedroom at the conserve building. So the 1 bedroom is at 388 square feet. There are only 8 units in this entire development. So this is your only choice if you want a 1-bedder. And with this being said, this unit are actually low-rise development. So if a buyer were to prefer high floors, this project, that means will not be something they'll consider. Next, we want to look at is the 2 bedrooms. We have 2 unit types here, which is the 2-bed 1-bath at 557 square feet and the 2-bed 2-bath at 646 square feet. But here's what caught me by surprise. The 2-bed 1-bath living room width, right, is only 2.8 meters as compared to the 2-bed 2-bath, it is 3.1 meters. 30 cm might not actually sound a lot, but actually you will feel a lot of difference when you visit the show flat. In terms of the 2-bed 1-bath, the facing is mostly highway, whereas for the 2-bed 2-bath, which I have circled here, in blue. They are usually more premium facing and some with no highway views. So based on these two layout, of course, I will want to choose the 2 bed 2 bath because for a 2 bed 2 bath to be able to fit in a 6-seater is very rare. Next, we look at the 2 bedroom which is in the conserve building at 592 square feet. Personally, even though it is slightly bigger in terms of size, but in my opinion, I do not actually recommend it as much as there is going to be a lot of competition from the high-rise 2-bedroom supply. So with that being said, my preference is definitely the 2 bed 2 bath, but this actually comes down to the price premium for extra space and better facing. If you want to know my choices according to the different facing, because there are quite a lot of stacks over here, you can reach out to me and my contact here. Next, we are going to do 3 bedrooms. This is where you get interesting because there are so many layouts and honestly not all will make sense. We are going to the most basic category which range from 786 square feet and 818 square feet. So the 786 square feet is a dumbbell layout, but the downside of it is the kitchen does not have window. There's no ventilation, which a lot of times when we come to a 3 bedroom might be a big red flag for resale buyers. The next one we want to look at is the 818 square feet unit. This is a traditional layout. That means the bedrooms are tucked on one side. Even though the facing might not be as nice and some of it is facing towards the highway, I will still choose this over the 786 square feet because ventilation and the livability of a 3 bedroom layout is very, very important for resale buyers in the future as compared to views. Okay, so the next one we want to see is actually the 904 square feet. This is the layout that I am most excited about. My top choice because for 904 square feet, you get a flexi room over here, which can be converted to a study or a helper's room. And it also has very nice internal premium facing. Not only that, it also has a dry kitchen for a luxury feeling. So all in all, for a 904 square feet, although the size doesn't seem like it, but it has everything a resale buyer would like with very minimal wasted space. Then we are moving on to the 926 square feet and also the 958 square feet unit. When I compare these internally, they are actually very, very similar to what the previous layout 904 square feet is. The main difference is the longer walkways. So based on that square feet difference, this will mean that you're also paying a premium for corridor space, which may not be as sensible if I compare it to the 904 square feet. The last one is actually the 1023 square feet. So the main difference is actually this has an additional household shelter, and also the difference is the third bathroom. What actually caught my attention is the third bathroom at the entrance area. So to be honest, I did find it a little bit weird. So I think this would make sense when a guest come in your house, they don't walk through your entire house before reaching the bathroom. The last one we want to look at is the 3 bedroom at the conserve building. They have bigger units which are 1119 square feet and 1259 square feet over here. Both of these has character, and to be honest, I feel that both of these layouts are very, very nice. They retain the original structure, but it does come with some compromises lah. The beams actually pop up based on the floor plan here. But of course, you could get your ID to do a feature wall, but just bear in mind that this also eats up your space. Last one we want to look at is actually the 4 bedrooms. There is type D1 and D2, which are very identical in terms of their layout. The only difference is D1 faces the forested area and D2 faces closer to the highway. What I like about the 4 bedrooms is actually you can hack down this wall to create a bigger living room. But this pillar cannot be removed. Even when you open the space, you will still be able to see that it's not very flushed in. The last one we want to look at is actually the 5 bedroom at 1453 square feet. And this is the floor plan I like the most because this has a large window which is right opposite the balcony. Extremely rare in a 5 bedroom unit. I compare this to a Lentor Mansion 5 bedroom. 5 bedroom is so similar, same kitchen, same living room, but no window feature. This window makes a huge difference for brightness and cross ventilation. There's also the 1475 square feet option, but it's the same layout with longer walkway and no window feature. So therefore, my advice is to stick to the 1453 square feet if you have the priority to be able to enjoy this layout and not have to pay additional for any wasted space. That's my analysis for today. If you're looking at this project and want a more detailed consultation, do reach out to me. My contact details are actually here. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in my next video.